Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a total deep dive into the biological cascade that gets kicked off by GLP-1 receptor agonists. We really need to stop looking at these medications as just some standalone weight loss miracle. Instead, let's start understanding them as a profound, incredibly complex metabolic intervention. To do that, we're going to synthesize data across endocrinology, obesity medicine, and longevity science. We're mapping out the connections between appetite regulation, cellular biology, gut health, and body composition. Why? Because that is how we ensure long-term metabolic resilience. So are you losing weight, or are you actually losing muscle? This right here is the central urgent mystery of this explainer. When the scale drops rapidly on a GLP-1 medication, we instinctively celebrate. But from a clinical physiology perspective, we have to ask, what exactly is vanishing? There is a massive biological distinction between losing metabolically inactive fat and the really dangerous loss of lean, functional muscle tissue. It's a trade-off, and it sits right at the intersection of evolutionary biology and modern pharmacology. And here is exactly why that distinction matters so much. Clinical trials are revealing a pretty startling reality. Ready for this? Between 25 to 40% of the total weight loss on GLP-1 therapies can actually be lean mass. We're talking about the skeletal muscle that drives your resting metabolic rate, supports your joints, and regulates glucose disposal. If we don't actively intervene, losing this much lean tissue sets off a severe systemic feedback loop. It drastically lowers your baseline energy expenditure, which basically sets the perfect stage for future weight regain and functional decline. To solve this, we're navigating 6 key domains today: the GLP-1 metabolic revolution, the muscle loss hazard, semaglutide versus tirzepatide, the protein preservation protocol, managing gastrointestinal side effects, and finally, achieving long-term metabolic health. Section 1. The GLP-1 metabolic revolution. Okay, let's get into the mechanics. At a molecular level, a GLP-1 receptor agonist mimics a naturally occurring incretin hormone, basically a metabolic messenger that's produced in your small intestine. But its effects, they are systemic. It binds to the pancreatic beta cells to enhance glucose-dependent insulin secretion while completely suppressing glucagon. But what's even more fascinating is its impact on neuroscience. These medications actually cross into the hypothalamus and brainstem, profoundly suppressing your appetite and reducing food-seeking behavior by altering these really complex reward pathways. It is a total, ground-up restructuring of your body's energy balance system. Now, these effects aren't just happening in the brain, they're mechanical too. GLP-1 agonists cause delayed gastric emptying. By slowing down gastric motility, food just stays in your stomach a lot longer. Biologically speaking, this is a brilliant way to reduce glucose spikes and keep you feeling full. But, and this is a big but, it creates a tricky cascading feedback loop. That extreme fullness naturally triggers severe caloric restriction, making it incredibly difficult to actually consume the nutrients your body desperately needs to maintain its cellular infrastructure, and that sets the stage for severe nutrient depletion. Which brings us to Section 2, the muscle loss hazard. Researchers have actually identified 2 distinct clinical responses in real-world patients. The ideal state is what we call the prime GLP-1 metabotype. This is where a patient achieves greater than 10% total weight loss, but effectively protects their muscle, keeping that lean mass loss under 5%. But conversely, there's the depletive GLP-1 metabotype, which shows massive total weight loss, over 20%, but at a devastating cost of highly elevated lean mass loss. This depletive state strongly correlates with some serious systemic downstream consequences: reduced exercise tolerance, persistent fatigue, and the worsening of pre-existing musculoskeletal pain, like knee osteoarthritis and spinal strain. Moving on to Section 3, semaglutide versus tirzepatide. Let's look at some longitudinal data derived from the digital phenotyping of over 7,000 patients. It reveals a really critical trend. Tirzepatide, while undeniably driving a greater magnitude of total weight loss, consistently drives a steeper relative decline in lean body mass compared to semaglutide, at literally every measured time point. By month 12, patients on tirzepatide experienced 2% excess lean mass loss compared to their counterparts on semaglutide. Deeper weight loss, it seems, can induce a much more profound catabolic trade-off. So why does this happen? The answer lies in single-cell RNA sequencing. Semaglutide is a specific GLP-1 receptor agonist. Tirzepatide, on the other hand, is a dual agonist, engaging both GLP-1 and GIP receptors. Single-cell mapping of human musculature actually shows that GIP receptors aren't just sitting on muscle fibers. They're broadly distributed across immune cells, macrophages, osteoclasts, and stromal tissue within the muscle microenvironment. This really broad tissue remodeling footprint provides a plausible molecular mechanism for why dual agonists might inadvertently trigger greater immune surveillance and lean tissue turnover right alongside that fat loss. It reminds us that every therapeutic benefit carries biological constraint. Section 4. The Protein Preservation Protocol. Okay, so let's talk solutions. The standard dietary reference intake of 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, that is highly insufficient during a state of chemically induced caloric deficit. If you're rapidly losing weight on these medications, you absolutely must scale your intake to 1.2 to 2.0 grams of protein per kilogram of your adjusted body weight. And for older adults, those 65 and up, the goal shifts to hitting 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. That's to overcome age-related anabolic resistance, which is basically the body's tendency to consume its own tissue for fuel. This isn't just a suggestion. These high target loads are biologically required to signal muscle protein synthesis. Practically speaking, achieving this requires a minimum of 20 to 30 grams of high-quality protein per meal just to flip the switch on that muscle synthesis pathway. Because your appetite signals are so heavily muted, you have to engineer high-density bites. We're talking 3 to 4 ounces of lean meat or leveraging protein powders and Greek yogurt. Crucially, you need to front-load your protein at breakfast. This acts as a metabolic anchor, effectively shifting your body out of overnight fasting catabolism. And hey, if solid food is triggering early satiety, leveraging liquid protein shakes is a totally clinically sound workaround. Section 5. Managing gastrointestinal side effects. Remember that delayed gastric emptying we discussed earlier? Well, that physiological loop means high-fat or greasy meals will literally just sit in your stomach for prolonged periods. That triggers severe nausea, heartburn, and vomiting, especially in that 24 to 48-hour window post-injection. To manage this, you've got to separate your fluids from your solids. Hydrate strictly between meals so water doesn't compete for your limited stomach volume. Break your food into small, really nutrient-dense mini meals and take a short post-meal walk. That mechanically stimulates digestion and motility. Hydration and fiber are literally your ultimate defense against the severe constipation that so frequently derails GLP-1 therapy. You need 2 to 3 liters of water daily just to maintain cellular function and process these nutrients. Women should be targeting 25 to 28 grams of fiber and men around 35 grams. But listen, you must introduce this carefully. As your gut microbiome's ecology adapts to the medication and the slower transit times, start with gentle, soluble fibers. Think oatmeal and zucchini, before you start demanding your GI tract process heavy, raw, fibrous vegetables. Section 6. Achieving long-term metabolic health. Here's the truth. You cannot just eat your way to muscle preservation. You have to mechanically demand it. There was a recent fascinating cohort study that demonstrated something amazing. When patients paired individualized adequate protein intake with resistance training just 2 to 3 times a week, they reduced their muscle mass loss to a mere 3%, while still losing 13% of their total body weight. This proves that sarcopenia, the loss of muscle tissue on GLP-1s, is absolutely not an unavoidable drug effect. It is a highly preventable metabolic adaptation, as long as you provide the right mechanical and nutritional signals. GLP-1 medications are a tool, not a standalone solution. This quote just beautifully summarizes the systems thinking we really need to adopt here. GLP-1 medications are merely one lever in a massive, interconnected biological network. If you want this medical tool to be durably effective, you have to account for the entire system. High-quality sleep directly impacts your circadian biology and glymphatic function, which is your brain's nightly cellular cleanup process. Proper stress adaptation regulates cortisol, which in turn dictates whether your body hoards fat or builds muscle. Diligent nutrition, resistance training, and nervous system recovery are permanently required to actually maximize the efficacy of this pharmacology. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. When the medication stops, will your metabolism actually be strong enough to carry the weight? The clinical reality is that weight regain is the rule, not the exception, when incretin therapy is discontinued. But if you've spent your treatment time diligently protecting your skeletal muscle, optimizing your gut microbiome, and ingraining resistance training into your lifestyle while you've built the ultimate metabolic insurance policy, your daily habits are the real medicine. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the true science of GLP-1 therapies. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.